Welcome back, everybody. We are here live at the Vintage Conservatory. I've got the absolute pleasure of introducing our special guest today. This is AJ, the Whisky Consultant. I can't wait to talk about whiskey. We're going to break down all the common myths, how to shop for it, and we're going to teach you how to sip it and nose it properly. No shot glasses here, only the real stuff. Yeah.
That sounds perfect. I love it. I love whiskey. I love that we're doing this.
Yeah, but honestly, too many people, I think, have some misconceptions. So that's going to be our main goal today. Let's see if we can peel back the onion layers and really take a deep dive. Before we jump into the Whiskey 101, I want to give it an introduction about yourself, though you are a certified whiskey ambassador. Tell us a little bit more about the history.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I am the whiskey consultant. I'm Canada's first certified whiskey ambassador. The Whiskey Ambassador program is actually from the UK. It's the first accredited program in Scotch whiskey. And I happen to be the first Canadian to take the course. So it's not like a brand ambassador that would support a particular brand, but really you're an ambassador to the spirit itself, Scotland's national drink. So that's how we kind of look at it when we do the course. And I was just the privilege to be the first one to do it. After that, I've now become the director of the Whiskey Ambassador in North America. So I teach the program. We have tutors that teach the program to other people across the country. And I also deliver the advanced course in Scotland once a year with my colleagues that we all descend into Scotland, and we do an intensive advanced course while we're there, which has theory, which has field trips is what I like to call them.
Field trips.
Field
My
trips.
kind of trips.
Yeah. And of course, the experiential part, which happens in the evening, which is really good. And of course, right now, I'm the director of spirits at Irongate Auctions. So this is right now, the Irongate Auctions is the largest wine and spirits auction house in the country. And I'm really privileged to be leading that division. And so I get to now meet with collectors and buyers from across the country who love the spirit, who love whiskey. And it's just a privilege for me to connect buyers with sellers in a very unique way.
So the next auction's coming up in September. Is that right?
Yeah, September 15th is the next auction. That's our 5th auction of the year. This September, we're going to be auctioning likely the most expensive bottle in Canadian history, if it sells. Yeah, it is the Macallan 50-year-old Lalique.
Wow.
It was released back in 2005. There's only 470 decanters ever made by Lalique Crystal Company. And they never knew at that time, Matt, that there was going to be a whole series. There's going to be 6 pillars, 6 decanters in this series. So out of the 470, many people bought them, and drank them, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then later on, the press release came out that there's going to be more in the series. And so now the hunt was on to complete a collection. And we're very privileged in Canada to have this one bottle come to auction. And for it to come through Irongate speaks a lot to Irongate and the trust of the consignor with us. And I'm just happy to share that story. And then, in September, we'll see someone bring it home.
Very nice. And as a Irongate auctioneer myself, I've definitely picked up a few bottles.
Well, I see one here. I can tell you have one here, which is beautiful.
And we're going to get into that just a little bit later. But we're here to talk about whiskey. And so in the simplest of terms, AJ, what is whiskey?
Yeah, whiskey, it really is it's a distilled spirit from grain, water, and yeast. You have 3 ingredients. That's it. So I feel it's one of the most elegant sort of drinks out there, right? It's very humble beginnings. It was basically made from leftover cereals, barley, grain for farmers so that it wouldn't spoil over the wintertime or get eaten, when being stored. So distilling it, bottling it, trading it was a commodity, and it comes from really simple, humble origins. And yet it really is something that transcends many countries as a beverage, especially in Scotland, Ireland, and around the world.
Honestly, whiskey's one of my favorite spirits of all time, and that's why I was super excited to put together this interview and taste some of the amazing selections that we have here. But I wanted to focus in on a key word you said there is fermented grains. Now, you say fermented grains, what are the options that a distiller might choose from if they wanted to make their own whiskey?
Yeah, it depends on what region you are in the world, right? And there are regulations depending on the country. So in Scotland, for example, there are 5 categories of Scotch whiskey. The most popular one is single malt Scotch whiskey, which we have several single malts here from Scotland. And it's 100% barley, okay? And so you're going to take your barley, you have to malt the barley, you have to mash that barley, you ferment it using yeast, so that's the third ingredient, you have water involved, and you distill it for a minimum of 2 times in order to produce a new make spirit, which is clear. After that, you put it into the cask and then age it for a minimum of 3 years before you can actually call it whiskey.
Interesting.
All right. And now most distilleries will age it for a bit longer, but some will age for 3, some for 12, 15, 21, and so on. But it really all depends at that point on the master distiller or master blender at that particular distillery.
Okay. So I want to, again, focus in on a key word here. You said looking at the fermented barley. How exactly do they do that?
Well, the fermentation process is essentially you're taking that mash, you're basically making a porridge out of barley, right? You're mashing it up, you're adding water to it, and this beautiful mash, or wort is what they call it, all right, goes into a mash tun, a big vat. You're basically making a beer, man. I'm not joking. You're making a beer, and you add the yeast to it. Once you add the yeast, you're now creating alcohol. The yeast eats up the sugars in the grain. You're creating an alcohol. You're creating carbon dioxide. You get a little foam off the top. And so you get a 5 to 7% liquid, which is called wort, okay? And that's beer, essentially. Then they take that beer, you put it through a copper pot still once, and you'll distill it. And basically, the alcohol will rise to the top, and you'll have essentially a low wine, which is 18 to 24% alcohol by volume.
Okay.
And then you're going to distill it one more time to get an alcohol between 60 to 70%.
Okay.
Okay, and that liquid is then cut by the stillman, usually to take the middle cut of that pure new make, which is basically characterizes the distillery style.
Oh.
So everyone does it differently,
Mhm.
but they cut it at a certain point. They cut the heart, and then they put that into the cask. All right, and everything
Gotcha.
that's left over kind of gets
Heads and tails.
gets
scrapped,
goes
yeah.
back in, gets distilled, and then can be used in future. It's a very efficient process, a very tight process, and whatever then goes into the cask is aged for a minimum of 3 years.
Another little whiskey lingo I want to zoom in on. You said single malt. Now, what exactly does that mean?
That is an excellent question. So I find in my course, single malt is one of the words that has the biggest misconception. And it makes sense because I actually had the same misconception. So single malt, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean a single batch. Okay, so
That's where my head goes initially.
when you think of single, you really think of it's one process. The process, yes, it's a batch process, but it actually means whiskey that's made at a single distillery. Okay.
Okay.
So for example, I'm looking at this Glenlivet, and I'll just take Scotch whiskey as an example. So we have a Glenlivet 15-year-old. This is a single malt Scotch whiskey. This was made at the Glenlivet distillery, all of it, okay? The youngest whiskey in here is 15 years old. That's by law. That's the youngest whiskey. Likely most of it is 15 years old, but you can actually have 16-year-old, 20-year-old, 21, likely not, but you can have that in this bottle and it still be called a single malt whiskey because it's from
Interesting.
one distillery. It's also made with 100% barley, which is very important by definition of a single malt Scotch whiskey.
Okay, so that definitely helped clears the air because I always wondered, is it an average? Is there a 7-year and a 21-year and they're just calling it 15 at that point?
That's a great question. Yeah, it has to be based on the youngest whiskey in the bottle for Scotch whiskey.
This feels, I'm going to flip the script a little bit because this feels like a good opportunity to talk about labels. So when you walk in, let's just say the LCBO or your general liquor store, and you're looking at some of these labels, whether it's Scotch, whether it's a Canadian whiskey, are there certain things that you look for to realize whether that be a good quality, or are there certain things that you should avoid when looking at certain labels?
That's just a great question. I think it's almost it's a very tough question. I think for most people, it's intimidating to walk in to your local liquor store, your LCBO in Ontario, and try to find something that, how do you know? And I think one of the biggest myths and misconceptions is Price is a proxy for quality. I think we all know this inside that it's not. We know this for many things. But when we walk into a store and we see, something behind a cabinet locked up, or we see something on the top shelf versus on the bottom
In
shelf.
a fancy bottle, yeah.
Yeah, or we see some beautiful artwork. So we just assume that, it must be better. And so the price is more, and therefore it's going to be better tasting whiskey. And that is not true. Not in the least. A lot of the time, I honestly ask people to go and see if they have a certified whiskey ambassador, because in Ontario, a lot of LCBO product consultants have taken the course.
Okay.
And they're passionate about the whiskey and they know about whiskey. And so they can come in and tell you about the regions, they can tell you about your style, they can even assess quickly, what do you like, peated or not peated? Well, maybe you'd want to stay over here. Do you even know what peat is?
Yeah.
If you don't,
yeah.
maybe we should start you off with a nice Speyside. And then, go from there. I always like to look at whiskeys that are, if I'm just starting out, I'd probably stay in the lowlands and Speyside. I would pick something like a Glenlivet. We use that in the course. Auchentoshan, again, I do really appreciate that one. And then in terms of maybe adventuring into even a peated whiskey, I would try something like a Lefroy. Just again, gives a variety of styles. And those are very their standard bottlings are very approachable from a price perspective. That's where I would start. I would start with those single malts. So go for a single malt, go for an age statement that's maybe 10 years, 12 years. Maybe a no age statement of whiskey is fine too, right? But pick it from those brands that have been around, for about 200 years. They know what they're doing. Start there before you start going into the higher price categories, and taste as much as you can, of course. If you're lucky enough, there are so many whiskey festivals, whiskey clubs, tasting events that go on. Go to those. They're fantastic. You're going to meet some great brand ambassadors, right? And they're going to tell you about their whiskey, but you get to try a lot. And then once you've picked up things that you like and styles you like, then you feel more comfortable going into the LCBO and picking up what you want, right? And again, I really love picking up bottles that are not super fancy looking. And I know there's some out there that are such good value for money, and they're excellent. And I recommend those all the time. I still get those messages from my clients. What was that one I tasted? They're like, really? I go, yeah, that was the one. But that's not that expensive. I said, exactly. It's not that expensive, but you loved it, so we'll buy it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the key summaries or key takeaways is price doesn't always equal good, and enjoy what you like, whether that be a particular bottle of whiskey, whether that's a wine or tequila. If you like that style, regardless of what the price point is, buy what you like.
You buy what you like. And, there's many things. You can look at the label, you can look at the label. It'll tell you what percentage of alcohol is in each bottle, right? So whiskey has to be bottled at 40% ABV in order to be called whiskey. Okay. First of all, especially in Scotland, actually in all jurisdictions around the world. So you probably want to buy, if you're new to it, 40, 43%, 46%. So it's a great way to introduce your palate to the typical distillery style. No question about it. And then when you're prepared, you can go into the higher proofs, 48, 50, cask strength. If you can find those bottles, you might like those as well from the same brand. But you find the brand that you like. But I say exploring all this whiskeys as much as you possibly can, whether it's Scotch whiskey or world whiskey. I mean, I would say just keep going, right? Just keep trying.
Now, there's another question I wanted to ask, because we've talked about single malts, but there is a lot of blended whiskeys out there. And typically what you might see, or at least I've noticed in the store, is that single malt's always going to be higher price point. Blended whiskeys are usually going to be in that lower tier. And as somebody who likes to make drinks, I'm always going to use a blended whiskey, or blend. If I'm using Scotch, I'm going to be a blended Scotch for a cocktail. Is that fair to say? We don't want to, let's just say, I'm not going to make a whiskey sour with a single malt. I mean, I could, but
I don't see why not, Matt.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you? Like, I mean, really, at the end of the day, we're here to serve people, right? We serve them. And so if that's what they'd like, that's what we'd give them. I feel that way. If someone wants to take a $2,000 bottle of whiskey and add Coke to it, do it. Do what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's your, not my $2,000 bottle of whiskey, but your $2,000 bottle of whiskey. It's fine. Definitely focus on single malts. It's a higher price product, but it represents like a 10 to 12% of all Scotch whiskey in terms of the category. But really the vast majority of whiskey, Scotch whiskey, is blends. Blends is the workhorse. And quite frankly, yes, it's commonly used in as a mixer. It's commonly drunk. It's definitely part of my heritage growing up.
Yep.
In terms of certain, cultural events where, you would have it's a blended whiskey makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, are quite good.
Yeah.
Consistent.
Black label coming out. Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very consistent product.
Mhm.
There's a lot of that product. And it's been the workhorse for Scott in the Scotch whiskey industry for a couple hundred years. It's only in the last 30 years or so that single malt has sort of taken more, prominence, because people want to know, well, what are the ingredients that are in that particular blend? Which ones are the single malts that they've added, and like how would they taste on their own? And then all of a sudden you're tasting single malts and you're appreciating where it comes from, the distillery, the style, how it's aged, what kind of wood's being used. All these things now come into play because it's understandable. And then there's quite a bit of variety. So there's always, people like to taste different things.
Well, one of the things I definitely want you to educate the audience. How do we taste whiskey properly? So we both got a dram in here. Before we actually, what exactly is a dram? One that of whiskey lingo.
A dram is, if I showed you, it's a measure. And if I showed you it's an actual measure, I don't know if I did it in the class with you, but they still have drams on little measuring cups for medicine and that sort of thing. You can have a wee dram. It's a really small measure. But for whiskey, yeah, it's a pour. It's basically a pour.
Okay, so almost an ounce.
It's
subjective.
I'd say it's subjective. Yeah.
Okay.
For some, it's an ounce, maybe a half, or who knows. Depending on the day you've had, it could be
a heavy dram.
Two, maybe.
Yeah.
You never know. But yeah, tasting whiskey, there's a difference between just tasting whiskey and appreciating whiskey, I find. But both should be fun, and both should be relaxed, and both should have time. Time is really important, and we kind of forget about that. So you want to have, my perspective is, you'd want to have a clean glass that has a tulip shape. These are Glencairns. You can get a Sherry Copita. You know what? I'll be honest with you, for some people, even a wine glass, I'm not saying that that's the best, even though it's much larger. It has that tapered nose, so you can get all the aromas in the bouquet that comes right in here, okay? And what I advise everyone is to take their whiskey and just have it underneath their nose and just sort of get used to that whiskey, right? So you want a clean glass, tulip-shaped glass. You want to nose your whiskey. I like to nose my whiskey like 2-3 times before I even taste it.
Okay.
One, it just sensitizes my nose to the alcohol, right? It gives me a sense of what might be in my glass. And yeah, it's, you have to take your time with it. So
glassware matters. Number
100%.
one. Yeah.
Glassware matters. Not that a glass that with a wide mouth isn't great for just enjoying your whiskey, but if you really want to pick out the notes and the aromas, all that work that's gone into making your whiskey, the time it's spent aging, the time it took to distill it, all the process, you kind of want to honor it a little bit by taking your time with it. And so you want to smell what the master distiller, master blender wanted you to smell, and I think it takes the right glass to do that.
Okay, so we're gonna nose it. How deep are you putting it in there? Because like if you want to really get fully in.
I like to get my nose, fairly close in. You want to keep your mouth slightly open. Some people like to say, try to smile, while you're just to keep your mouth slightly open.
Okay.
This is why my wife doesn't drink whiskey with me in public anymore, because it's just, here I am,
here
smiling, nosing. Takes me an hour to drink anything now,
Okay.
And, 2-3 times. And
what are you getting on the nose?
well, I'm getting a lot of vanilla. I'm getting a lot of caramel. I mean, it's just absolutely lovely. Some people will say, nose at the top and the bottom, but really you just want to get your nose in there. I like to move it from side to side, because you know what, depending on the time, every 15-20 minutes, your ability to nose, it changes it slightly. So you just
I
want
get
to,
like spice. I get like tobacco. Like
that's from the
almost-
Lot 40.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
you can definitely tell it's a rye whiskey.
So after you've done the nosing, right, you can have a taste. And what I recommend is you have a taste and you hold the whiskey in your mouth. So what you want to do is you want to hold the whiskey in your mouth. You want to kind of
Coat the tongue.
coat the tongue, coat the mouth. Some would say even chew it. All right. You swallow it and then you just kind of breathe out.
Mm-hmm. Because like as you breathe, you get more notes, I find.
100%. Yeah. We do a really good experiment, especially in the advanced course, around the difference between like taste and aroma. And you really want to engage all of your senses. The nose is incredibly important for picking up all the aromas. It really is. That's what you need your nose for, nosing. Yeah, and that's basically how you should appreciate nose your whiskey, right? You want that glassware. You can go back again, do it again.
Are there any big no's or red flags with tasting?
Well, I would say what you don't want to do is you don't necessarily want to chill or cool your whiskey, because, in adding ice, it's totally, I think, acceptable to add ice. I mean, that's fine for, just drinking and enjoying your whiskey. But if you really want to pull out the aromas and the flavors, it's definitely frowned upon. You don't want to do that because you'll just block everything up. You'll close up the bouquet, you'll close everything up, and you actually want to release more of the aromas. And actually, one thing you could do is you take, room temperature water, hopefully like distilled water, demineralized water, add a couple of drops to your glass, and then go through the process of nosing and tasting again. As soon as you decrease the alcohol by volume, every time you decrease it down, you're releasing more flavors and more congeners. And quite frankly, you usually for me, it's like drinking a different whiskey.
As you water it down.
As you water it down.
Interesting.
And that's typically for a tasting panel, you'd want to water it down to pick up those notes that you usually find on the bottles that they write out every time.
The tasting notes, that's a paragraph from like, how is this possible? Notes of, I don't know, chocolate covered peanuts. Some like, what is this?
Yep. The stacks in the library, like that sort of musty sort of like things. You get very personal descriptions, which is such a beautiful thing. But it's your own experience, and that's the best part. You've done tastings with me, right, Matt? Do I ever tell you what it smells like? Do I ever tell you what?
That's the other thing, the power of influence with tasting. As soon as somebody says, oh, I get vanilla, I swear you're going to smell vanilla. Or someone says, oh, I get a little coconut. I find like you almost will get influenced by the power of suggestion. I think that's what it is. One of the other tasting red flags I was personally guilty of was wearing scents. I had a cologne that I wore to a tasting. Man, did I get it. It was just
it's a bit of a
that is a red flag for taste, because like all these aromas, and I've got like what was I wearing, like diesel, like this was a while ago before I made that mistake. So don't wear cologne to a tasting or perfume unless you want the brand rep or whoever's leading it to say something to you.
I think that is a very wise tip, because you want to smell what's in the glass and nothing more. And it's a good tip. One other tip I would recommend is if you never taste one whiskey, I think it's like a theme. I'd always have several whiskeys, especially at a tasting if you're trying to know something different. As you go through the different whiskeys, always go back to one of the whiskeys. Leave some in your glass.
Don't finish each one.
Don't finish. Just a little bit would be fine. What I learned once, especially during the pandemic, there's a lot of online tastings, and they'd end late, and I would have this glassware that I just hadn't emptied yet. Like they were empty, but I didn't clean them out yet. And I'd wake up the next morning, my nose is fresh, and I would then nose the glasses, these empty glasses, and I would pick up more aromas and from the glass on an empty glass, because all of the aromas were sticking. The congeners were sticking to the glass, and I could pick up far more the next morning with a fresh nose than during the tasting the night previous.
It's funny how that works. But we definitely covered tasting 101. I think we covered a lot here, AJ. Are there any other, in closing, things you want the audience to know about whiskey, best practices, things we should know?
I think what's really important is that you try as many whiskeys as you possibly can. What I really like to do is drink and sample my whiskeys with other people. I think that's the best way to do it, whether you do it in groups. A lot of whiskey groups out there, in person, online. Some of my favorite gatherings is, that Friday night with a group of folks who share the drams and even do blind tastings. And then going out and meeting the community. And you could do things like educating yourself, doing more courses. That's great. Read as much as you can, do as much as you can in terms of courses, but try as much whiskey as you possibly can, right? Really understand it. Buy the things you like. And then I really recommend going out there and going to the trade shows, meeting the brand ambassadors who know a lot about their brands, trying what they have on offer, and finding the things that you like. You really can't do wrong. And for my collector groups out there, you know what? Collect things that you like, collect things that you've learned about, and don't collect things just because someone else said it's a good thing to collect. That's my number one advice. If anything, if it doesn't turn out in 5, 10, 15 years to be something of value, you can at least drink it.
Yep.
Right?
When in doubt.
But you should like what you collect. So always buy one to drink, one to save, and as someone very wisely told me, one to share. And that's a great way to collect because you're doing more than just for yourself. You're doing something for the community. And I think that's always a good way to go.
One last question.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on Instagram? What are the handles?
Yeah, I'm the Whisky Consultant. So look up Whisky Consultant. And my website, thewhiskeyconsultant.com. You can find me at irongate.com. And of course, at thewhiskeyambassador.com as well.
Amazing. We're going to share all those links. We've got more exciting content coming out. AJ, thank you so much for joining me on this amazing day. And cheers.
Slàinte. Thanks, Matt.
Let's go.